Captain Lee Dae-hyun stared at the screen showing empty space ahead of his ship. The Indomitable was 3 days into a routine patrol mission along the outer rim of human territory. His crew of 42 humans had been exploring this sector for 2 months without finding anything interesting. Just empty space, dead rocks, and the occasional asteroid field. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal," reported Communications Officer Park Min-hee from her station. She was a tall woman with short black hair and quick fingers that danced across her controls. "It's coming from the Velthari frequency." Dae-hyun turned in his chair. The Velthari were one of the older species in the Galactic Federation. They looked like walking crystals and were known for being peaceful traders and diplomats. "How far away?" 2 hours at full speed, sir," answered Navigator Kim Junho. He was young, maybe 25, with eager eyes and a habit of speaking fast when excited. "The signal is weak but consistent. Any other ships in the area?" Dae-hyun asked. Minnie checked her sensors. "Negative, sir. We're the closest Federation vessel." Dae-hyun stood up. He was a man in his 40s with graying hair and scars on his hands from his early days as a ship engineer. "Set course for the signal. Maximum speed." The Indomitable was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and well-armed. As they traveled toward the distress signal, the crew prepared for whatever they might find. In space, distress signals usually meant pirates, equipment failure, or worse. 2 hours later, they dropped out of faster-than-light travel and saw the source of the signal. A large Velthari diplomatic ship was under attack by 6 smaller vessels. The attacking ships were dark gray with sharp edges and weapons that glowed red. Dae-hyun recognized them immediately. "Korthak raiders," he said quietly. The bridge went silent. Everyone in the Federation knew about the Korthaks. They were the nightmare species that lived in the dark corners of the galaxy. Tall, muscular beings with 4 arms and natural armor plating. They had never lost a war. Most species simply paid them tribute rather than fight. "Sir," Minnie said nervously, "Federation protocols say we should call for backup when encountering Korthak forces. How long would backup take to arrive?" Dae-hyun asked. 6 hours minimum, Junho replied. On the screen, they could see the Velthari ship taking heavy damage. Parts of its crystalline hull were already breaking apart. The Korthak ships moved around it like sharks, firing continuously. "They don't have 6 hours, Dae-hyun said. He turned to his weapons officer. "Charge all weapons. Prepare for combat." The weapons officer, a woman named Choi Young-hee, looked shocked. "Sir, there are 6 of them and 1 of us. The Korthaks have never been defeated in battle." Dae-hyun smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Then today will be educational for everyone." The Indomitable raced toward the battle. The human ship was smaller than any of the Korthak vessels, but it was fast and its crew was determined. As they approached, Dae-hyun opened a channel to the Korthak ships. "Korthak vessels, this is Captain Lee Dae-hyun of the human ship Indomitable. You are attacking a Federation diplomatic vessel in neutral space. Withdraw immediately." The reply came in a voice like grinding metal. "Human ship, you will leave this area or be destroyed. The Korthaks do not recognize your authority." "Wrong answer," Dae-hyun said. He closed the channel and looked at his crew. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to save those people. Use everything we have." The battle began badly for the humans. The Korthak ships were heavily armed and their hulls were thick. The Indomitable's first attack barely scratched the nearest enemy ship. In return, the Korthaks fired a volley that nearly crippled the human vessel. "Shields down to 60%, reported engineer Kim Junho from his damage control station. But Dae-hyun had not become a ship captain by fighting fair. "Full power to engines. Ram the nearest ship, sir?" Young-hee looked confused. "You heard me. Ram them." The Indomitable shot forward like a missile. The Korthak ship tried to move out of the way, but the human vessel was too fast. The collision tore a massive hole in the Korthak ship's hull and sent both vessels spinning. "Damage report," Dae-hyun called out as alarms blared. "Forward hull breached, but we're still fighting," Junho replied. The ramming attack had surprised the Korthaks. They had never seen a Federation species use their ship as a weapon. While they were confused, Dae-hyun ordered another unconventional attack. "Overload the shield generators and release all power at once toward the enemy ships." "That could destroy our own ship," Min-hee protested. "Better than letting them destroy the Velthari," Dae-hyun replied. The shield overload created a massive energy wave that hit 3 Korthak ships. Their systems went haywire and 2 of them collided with each other. The Indomitable lost all its shields, but now the odds were more even. The fight continued for 30 minutes. The humans used every dirty trick they could think of. They fired their escape pods like missiles. They vented atmosphere to create a cloud that confused enemy sensors. When their main weapons failed, they used mining equipment and maintenance tools as weapons. The Korthax had superior firepower, but they had never faced an enemy that fought like humans. Every time they thought they had won, the human ship found a new way to hurt them. The humans seemed to become more dangerous when they were losing, not less. Finally, the remaining 3 Korthax ships decided they had had enough. They retreated into faster-than-light travel, leaving their damaged comrades behind. The Indomitable was barely holding together. Smoke filled the corridors and half the systems were offline. But they had won. "Open a channel to the Velthari ship," Daehyun ordered. The face that appeared on screen was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Velthari looked like a person made of living crystal, with light flowing through their transparent body. This was Ambassador Velthar, and they looked very frightened. "Human Captain," Velthar said in a voice like wind chimes, "we thank you for saving our lives, but you do not understand what you have done." "We saved your ship from pirates," Daehyun replied. "What's to understand?" "Those were not pirates," Velthar said sadly. "Those were official Korthak military vessels. You have just attacked the Korthak hegemony. They consider any interference in their operations to be a declaration of war." Dr. Park Min-hee stepped forward. She had studied alien cultures for 10 years and served as the ship's diplomatic officer. "Why is everyone so afraid of the Korthaks? They're just another species." Belthar's crystal body grew dim with fear. "They are the apex predators of the galaxy, Dr. Park. They have conquered 17 star systems by turning entire planets into glass. In 3,000 years, no species has ever defeated them in war. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply destroy any species that opposes them." "How many ships do they have?" Min-hee asked. "Over 10,000 warships, each larger than your vessel. They have been the masters of warfare for longer than most civilizations have existed." The bridge was quiet for a moment. Everyone understood the situation now. They had just started a war with the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. Captain Daehyun looked at his damaged ship and his tired crew. Then he looked back at the Velthari ambassador. "Well," he said calmly, "I guess they've never fought humans before." Velthar stared at the human captain in amazement. Any other species would be begging for mercy or trying to find a way to apologize. But this human seemed almost pleased at the prospect of fighting the galaxy's most feared warriors. "Captain," Velthar said quietly, "I do not think you understand. The Korthaks will not just destroy your ship. They will hunt down every human in the galaxy. Your entire species will be extinct within a year." Daehyun smiled again, and this time it was the smile of a predator. "Then they're going to learn something new about humans. We don't scare easy, and we really don't like bullies." As the 2 damaged ships limped toward the nearest Federation station, Ambassador Velthar wondered if they had just witnessed the beginning of the galaxy's salvation or its complete destruction. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within 6 hours of the battle, every major news network was broadcasting the same impossible story. Humans had attacked Korthak military vessels and lived to tell about it. On Earth, President Yoon Jae-won sat in his office reading reports from across human space. He was a thin man with gray hair who had spent his life in politics, but today he felt like a general preparing for war. His secretary knocked on the door. "Sir, Admiral Choi Woo-sung and General Han So-min are here for the emergency meeting." "Send them in," Yoon replied. Admiral Choi was a large man with kind eyes and steady hands. He had commanded Earth's space fleet for 15 years and had never lost a ship under his command. General Han was smaller but fierce, with short hair and quick movements. She ran Earth's military intelligence and knew more about alien weapons than any other human. "Mr. President," Admiral Choi said as he sat down, "we have a problem. The Galactic Federation Council wants us to surrender Captain Lee and his crew to the Korthaks as a peace offering." "What did you tell them?" Yoon asked. "I told them to go to hell," General Han replied, but more diplomatically. President Yoon stood up and walked to his window. Outside, he could see the lights of New Seoul stretching to the horizon. 50 years ago, humans had been alone in the universe. Now they were part of a galactic community with nearly 1,000 different species. But today they might be alone again. "What are our military capabilities compared to the Korthaks?" he asked. General Han opened her tablet. They have roughly 10,000 ships of various sizes. We have about 800. Their ships are bigger and more heavily armed. Their soldiers are stronger and have natural armor. By every measure, we should lose badly. Should, Admiral Choi said with a smile. But Captain Lee just proved that should doesn't always matter. 3 hours later, President Yoon stood before the cameras that would broadcast his message to every world in the galaxy. Behind him stood the flags of Earth and all the human colonies. His speech was simple and direct. Citizens of the galaxy, he began. Today the Korthak hegemony demanded that humanity surrender our people who defended innocent civilians from unprovoked attack. They want us to apologize for saving lives and hand over our heroes to be executed. He paused and looked directly into the camera. Humanity's answer is no. We do not apologize for defending the innocent. We do not surrender our people to bullies. If the Korthaks want a war, they will get one. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and dramatic. 17 species recalled their ambassadors from Earth within hours. The stock markets on 12 worlds crashed as traders realized that Galactic War was coming. But other reactions surprised everyone. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the human colonists watched the president's speech in the community center. When it ended, the room was silent for a moment. Then a miner named Jang Hyunwoo stood up. My grandfather fought in the Korean War, he said loudly. My father fought in the water wars on Mars. I guess it's my turn. By the end of the day, every adult on the planet had volunteered for military service. Similar scenes played out on every human world. The recruitment centers couldn't handle the crowds. Humans who had spent their lives as farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers lined up to join the military. They knew they were facing the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, but they didn't care. Meanwhile, in the dark reaches of space, War Chief Gravthok studied the battle recordings from the engagement with the human ship. He was ancient even by Korthak standards, having lived for 8 centuries and conquered dozens of worlds. His forearms moved across the control panels as he reviewed the footage again and again. Sub-Commander Thulgax, he called to his second-in-command. Come look at this. Thulgax was younger, only 3 centuries old, but he was considered one of the best tactical minds in the Korthak military. He watched the recording of the human ship ramming his people's vessel. They used their ship as a weapon, he said, confused. Why would they do that? It could have destroyed them. That's exactly what puzzles me, Gravthok replied. Every species we've fought becomes more cautious when they're losing. They try to preserve their lives and ships. But look at this. He showed another part of the recording where the human ship overloaded its shields to damage Korthak vessels. They became more dangerous as the battle continued, not less. When their situation became hopeless, they started using tactics that could kill them. Perhaps they were desperate, Thulgax suggested. No, Gravthok said slowly. Desperate creatures make mistakes. These humans made calculated decisions to sacrifice their safety for tactical advantage. I've never seen anything like it. The war chief pulled up intelligence reports on human history. What he read made him uncomfortable. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other before they reached the stars. Their wars were brutal and total. They had weapons capable of destroying their own planet and had nearly used them several times. Sub-Commander, he said quietly, did you know that humans evolved from predators? Not scavengers or herbivores like most intelligent species. They were hunters. So are we, Thulgax replied. No, we're not. We're raiders. We take what we want from weaker species. But humans, they hunted creatures larger and stronger than themselves. They worked in groups to bring down prey that could kill any individual human. They chased their food across vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. Gravthok closed the files and looked at his sub-commander. I'm beginning to think we made a mistake choosing humans as our enemy. Back on Earth, Admiral Choi stood in the Fleet Command Center watching as hundreds of ships prepared for war. The human fleet was growing rapidly as construction yards worked around the clock to build new vessels. But it wasn't just the ships that impressed him. It was the people. Commander Oh Hee-jin reported from the training facility where new recruits were learning to fight. Admiral, these volunteers are learning faster than any group I've ever seen. They seem to have a natural understanding of military tactics. How fast are they learning? Choi asked. We're putting people through 6-month training programs in 6 weeks, and they're not just learning the basics. They're improving on our tactics and suggesting new strategies. In another part of the facility, Dr. Lim Haiyung was studying human psychology during wartime. Her research was revealing something interesting about her own species. When humans prepared for war, their brain chemistry changed. They became more focused, more aggressive, and more willing to take risks. "It's like we have a switch in our brains," she explained to Admiral Choi during a briefing. "Most of the time, we're peaceful and cooperative. But when we're threatened, especially when our families or friends are in danger, we become something else entirely." "Something else?" Choi asked. "Persistence hunters, pack predators. We don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure the threat never comes back." Across the galaxy, other species were beginning to understand what was happening. The Velthari had shared their recordings of the battle with their allies. Ancient species that had existed for millions of years were studying human behavior and coming to disturbing conclusions. On the crystal world of Velthera Prime, the Council of Elders met in emergency session. Elder Morthak, who was old when the Korthax first appeared in the galaxy, spoke to the assembled leaders. "I have seen many species rise and fall," the ancient being said. "I have watched the Korthax destroy civilizations that seemed invincible. But I have never seen anything like these humans." "They are just one small species," another elder replied. "Surely they cannot threaten the Korthak hegemony." "That's what worries me," Morthak said. "They should be terrified. They should be begging for peace. Instead, they're excited. They're actually looking forward to this war." Meanwhile, on dozens of worlds, other species were making their own calculations. The Zephyrians began moving their fleets away from Korthak space. The Crystalline Collective started building defensive fortifications. Everyone could sense that something unprecedented was about to happen. In his flagship, War Chief Gravthok received reports from his scouts. The humans were mobilizing their entire civilization for war. Every ship they had was being armed. Every world was preparing for battle. Most disturbing of all, they seemed confident. "They think they can win," Tholgak said in disbelief. "Yes," Gravthok replied, "and that terrifies me more than any weapon they could build." The war chief had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed countless fleets. He had faced enemies with superior technology, greater numbers, and powerful allies, but he had never faced an enemy that thought it could beat him. As the Korthak fleet began moving toward human space, Gravthok wondered if his people had finally met their match, or if they had awakened something in the galaxy that should have been left sleeping. The mining colony of New Busan hung in space like a metal flower, its habitat rings slowly rotating around a central hub. Home to 50,000 humans, it was one of the outer colonies that supplied rare metals to Earth and the inner worlds. It was also the first target the Korthax chose for their demonstration of power. Commander Oh Hijin stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Gwangju, watching the enemy fleet approach. She was 35 years old with sharp eyes and steady hands. Behind her, the human defense fleet looked pitifully small compared to the Korthak armada. "Enemy numbers?" she asked her tactical officer. 300 ships, Commander," replied Lieutenant Bae Donghyun. He was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 19, but his voice was steady. "We have 67. The odds were terrible, but Oh Hyejin had studied the battle recordings from Captain Lee's engagement. The Korthaks were powerful, but they fought like they expected to win easily. They weren't prepared for enemies who refused to follow the rules. "All ships, this is Commander O," she broadcast to the fleet. "Remember what we learned about our enemy. They're stronger and have better weapons, but they think like raiders, not soldiers. They expect us to run when things get bad." On the screen, the Korthak fleet moved into attack formation. Their ships were massive things, dark gray with red weapon ports glowing like evil eyes. At the center was War Chief Gravthok's flagship, twice the size of any human vessel. The attack began exactly as expected. The Korthaks opened fire from maximum range, their heavy weapons designed to destroy enemies before they could fight back. The human ships took heavy damage immediately. "Shields down to 40%, called out the bridge crew of the destroyer's soul as enemy fire pounded their hull. But instead of retreating, the human ships did something the Korthaks had never seen before. They accelerated toward the enemy fleet, taking more damage but closing the distance rapidly. "All ships, execute Ghost Protocol," Commander O ordered. The Ghost Protocol was a human invention born from desperation and creativity. When their shields failed and their weapons couldn't penetrate enemy armor, human ships would become weapons themselves. The destroyer Inchin, its hull breached and engines failing, aimed itself at a Korthak cruiser and fired its engines at maximum power. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also created chaos in the Korthak formation. As debris and energy fields spread through space, other human ships used the confusion to attack. Lieutenant Bae Dong-hyun watched from his station as the battle unfolded. "Commander, the Korthaks are pulling back." They weren't expecting kamikaze attacks. "Good," Oh Hye-jin replied. "Signal all ships. If your vessel is too damaged to fight effectively, consider ramming the nearest enemy." Across the battlefield, human crews made the same decision again and again. When their ships were crippled, they turned them into missiles. When their weapons failed, they boarded enemy vessels with nothing but small arms and determination. On the Korthak flagship, War Chief Gravthok watched the battle with growing alarm. His forces had superior firepower and should have won within minutes. Instead, the battle had been raging for 2 hours, and his ships were taking heavy casualties. "Status report," he demanded. Sub-Commander Thulgax looked at his displays with confusion. "We've destroyed 41 human ships, but we've lost 37 of our own. The humans are using their damaged vessels as weapons." "That's impossible," Gravthok growled. "No species sacrifices ships deliberately." "They're not just sacrificing ships," Thulgax replied. "Watch this." On the main screen, they could see a human destroyer that had lost most of its hull to weapons fire. The ship should have been dead in space, but it was still fighting. Its crew had sealed themselves into the remaining sections and were using mining equipment as weapons. "Their ship is 90% destroyed," Thulgax said in amazement. "But they're still shooting at us." Worse yet, the human crew was singing. The Korthak sensors picked up radio transmissions from the dying ship. The humans inside were singing an old Korean folk song as they continued to fight. Gravthok had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets, but he had never seen anything like this. "Are they insane?" "I don't think so," Thulgax replied quietly. "I think this is what they're like when they're serious." The battle reached its peak when the human flagship Defiance, commanded by Captain Shin Yunwoo, found itself surrounded by 6 Korthak ships. The human vessel was outgunned and outnumbered, but Captain Shin had one advantage the enemy didn't expect. "All power to weapons," he ordered. "Overload everything." "Sir, that will destroy our power core," his engineer protested. "Better than letting them take the colony," Shin replied. The Defiance became a miniature sun for 30 seconds as its overloaded weapons tore through the Korthak ships around it. The explosion destroyed the human flagship, but took 4 enemy vessels with it. Lieutenant Bae Dong-hyun, fighting aboard a badly damaged destroyer, watched the explosion light up space. He was in a corridor that had been breached by enemy fire, wearing only an emergency suit and carrying a rifle designed for ground combat. Behind him, Korthak warriors were trying to board his ship. The Korthaks were larger than humans with 4 arms and natural armor. Each one was strong enough to tear a human apart. But as they entered the corridor, they found something they didn't expect. Bae Dong-hyun stood alone in the corridor, blocking their path to the ship's reactor. He had been fighting for 6 hours. His suit was torn, he was bleeding from multiple wounds, and his ammunition was almost gone, but he was still singing that old Korean folk song, and he was still shooting. "Human," one of the Korthak warriors called out in broken standard. "Surrender. You cannot win." Bae looked at the massive alien and smiled. "I don't have to win. I just have to hold this hallway." The fight continued. Every time the Korthaks tried to advance, the young human drove them back. He used every trick he could think of. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he used a maintenance tool. When that broke, he used pieces of debris as weapons. The Korthak warriors had fought many species across the galaxy, but they had never encountered anything like this human. He was smaller than them, weaker than them, and armed with inferior weapons. But he wouldn't stop fighting, and he wouldn't retreat. "Why do you not surrender?" another Korthak demanded. "You will die here." "Maybe," Bae replied, reloading his weapon with his last ammunition clip. "But you're not getting past me to hurt my friends." The battle raged in that corridor for another hour. When human reinforcements finally arrived, they found Lieutenant Bae Dong-hyun still standing guard. He had held the corridor against 12 Korthak warriors for 7 hours total. Around him lay the bodies of aliens twice his size, and he was still singing quietly to himself. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out on dozens of ships. Human crews that should have surrendered kept fighting. Damaged vessels that should have been abandoned continued to attack. Individual humans held positions that entire squads should have been unable to defend. Finally, after 8 hours of battle, the Korthak fleet retreated. War Chief Gravthok's forces had technically won. They controlled the space around New Busan, and the human fleet was destroyed, but the victory felt like defeat. Casualty report, Gravthok demanded. We've lost 112 ships, Thulgax replied. The humans lost all 67 of theirs. Then we won, Gravthok said, but his voice held no satisfaction. Did we? Thulgax asked. We came here to demonstrate our power and terrify the humans into surrender. Instead, we barely survived a battle against a force less than a quarter our size. Gravthok looked at the tactical displays showing the battle's progression. His forces had started with overwhelming superiority. They should have won in minutes with minimal losses. Instead, they had fought for 8 hours and lost more ships than they had in the last 10 years of raiding. Sub-Commander, he said quietly. In your assessment, what would happen if we faced a human fleet of equal size to ours? Thulgax was silent for a long moment. Based on what we've seen today, sir, I believe we would lose. The war chief stared at the debris field that had once been the human defense fleet. Every piece of wreckage represented a crew that had fought to the death rather than surrender. These humans had faced impossible odds and had somehow made the victory costly enough to feel like defeat. Send a message to the Hegemony Council, Gravthok ordered. Tell them we need reinforcements. All of them. How many, sir? Gravthok looked at the battle recordings one more time. He saw human ships ramming his vessels, human crews fighting with broken weapons, and young humans like Bei Dongyun holding positions that should have been impossible to defend. Every ship we have, he said finally. I think we're going to need them. As the Korthak fleet limped away from New Busan, the survivors of the human colony watched from their shelters. They had lost their defending fleet, but they had seen something remarkable. For the first time in galactic history, the Korthaks had retreated from a battle they had won. Word of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The impossible had happened. Humans had made the apex predators of space afraid. The news from New Busan changed everything. Across human space, the reaction was not grief or fear, but rage. The colonists had held out for 7 hours against impossible odds before the Korthaks finally broke through their defenses. By the time rescue ships arrived, New Busan was a graveyard. Fleet Admiral Kang Tae-hyun stood in the war room on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing Korthak positions throughout the galaxy. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much combat. Around him, the best military minds of humanity planned their response. Admiral, reported Colonel Song Minji, a field intelligence officer who had just returned from the outer colonies. Every human world is mobilizing. We've got volunteers coming from places I didn't even know had people. The numbers were staggering. In the 3 weeks since New Busan, over 2 million humans had joined the military. Factory workers were learning to pilot fighters. Teachers were training as combat medics. Even children too young to fight were working in ammunition factories and supply depots. What's our fleet strength now? Admiral Kang asked. 800 ships when this started, replied Captain Nam Silgi, his tactical advisor. We're up to 1,200 now, with more coming online every day. The civilian yards are working triple shifts. But Admiral Kang wasn't thinking about ship numbers. He was thinking about Lieutenant Bei Dong-hyun, who had held a single corridor for 7 hours against 12 Korthak warriors. He was thinking about Captain Shin Eunwoo, who had destroyed his own ship to take 4 enemy vessels with him. Most of all, he was thinking about the lesson those sacrifices had taught him. Colonel Song, he said, I want you to analyze every battle the Korthaks have ever fought. Find their patterns, their weaknesses, their standard operating procedures. Yes, sir. What are we looking for specifically? We're looking for proof of something I suspect, Admiral Kang replied. I think the Korthaks have been fighting the same way for so long that they've forgotten how to adapt. Dr. Lim Hayoung, the psychologist who had been studying human behavior during wartime, presented her findings to the military leadership. Her research had uncovered something remarkable about how humans responded to extreme threats. Gentlemen, ladies, she began, I've been studying the psychological profiles of our volunteers. What I've found is unprecedented in my field. She pulled up brain scans and hormone level charts. When most species face a superior enemy, their stress hormones increase fear and caution. They become more careful, more defensive. But humans are different. Admiral Kang leaned forward. How different? When humans face a threat to their families or communities, their brain chemistry changes in the opposite direction. They become more aggressive, more willing to take risks, and more focused on eliminating the threat permanently. She showed video recordings from the New Busan battle. Look at Lieutenant Bay's vital signs during his corridor fight. His heart rate was elevated, but his stress indicators were actually decreasing as the battle went on. He was becoming calmer and more focused as the situation became more dangerous. What does that mean for our strategy? Captain Nam asked. It means, Dr. Lim replied, that we get more dangerous when we're losing, not less. The Korthaks are used to enemies who become desperate and make mistakes under pressure. But pressure makes humans more effective, not less. Meanwhile, in the dark reaches of space, War Chief Gravthok was discovering exactly what Dr. Lim had described. His forces had conquered the New Busan system, but human attacks on Korthak positions had increased, not decreased. Status report, he demanded from his flagship bridge. Sub-Commander Thulgax looked exhausted. In the past 2 weeks, humans have attacked 17 of our supply convoys, destroyed 3 communication relay stations, and raided 4 fuel depots. They're not trying to hold territory. They're trying to blind us and starve us. Impossible, Gravthok growled. They don't have enough ships for that many operations. They're not using ships for most of these attacks, sir. They're using small groups of humans and captured Korthak vessels. They board our ships, steal them, and use them against us. The war chief pulled up tactical displays showing human raid patterns. What he saw defied everything he knew about warfare. The humans weren't trying to fight his main fleet. Instead, they were attacking everywhere his fleet wasn't. This is not how warfare works, he said in frustration. You fight the enemy fleet. You conquer their planets. You force them to surrender. The humans seem to have different ideas about warfare, Thulgax replied. They're fighting like what? Like a pack of predators hunting a larger animal. They're not trying to defeat us in direct combat. They're trying to wear us down, confuse us, and strike when we're weakest. Elder Korthak Zermoth, ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, joined the conference from his own ship. He had been alive for over 2 million years and had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. War Chief, the elder said in a voice like grinding stone, I have been reviewing our historical databases. I believe I know what we are facing. Explain, Gravthok demanded. Long ago before your birth, we encountered a species called the Vethmori. They fought like these humans fight. Relentless, coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Willingness to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage. What happened to them? We destroyed them completely, Zermoth replied. But it took us 3 centuries and cost us more ships than any war before or since. And the Vethmori were herbivores who only fought when cornered. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If peaceful herbivores had cost the Korthak so much, what would natural predators do? On Earth, Admiral Kang was implementing Operation Persistence Hunt, named after humanity's evolutionary hunting strategy. Instead of meeting the Korthak fleet in direct battle, human forces would strike at their support infrastructure and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. We're not trying to win fair fights, he explained to his commanders. We're trying to make every Korthak operation costly and dangerous. Make them afraid to leave their main fleet. Force them to guard every supply line and communication relay. Private Song Minji had become something of a legend among the human forces. She was a war correspondent who fought alongside the troops she reported on. Her dispatches from the front lines were broadcast to every human world and had become required reading in military academies. Today, I watched Sergeant Park Kwang-ho lead a boarding party against a Korthak supply ship, she wrote. The enemy vessel was 3 times the size of our raider, with a crew of 40 Korthaks. Our team had 12 humans. The sergeant's plan was simple. Board the ship, take control of the bridge, and use their own weapons against them. When I asked him if he was worried about the odds, he smiled and said, 12 humans is plenty. We hunt in packs. The boarding action lasted 43 minutes. When it was over, the Korthak ship belonged to us. Sergeant Park's team suffered 3 wounded, no killed. The Korthak crew surrendered after watching humans fight with damaged weapons and improvised explosives. But the most remarkable thing was what happened next. Instead of celebrating their victory, the humans immediately began planning their next raid. They're treating this war like a hunt that won't end until every threat to human space is eliminated. These reports had an unexpected effect across the galaxy. Other species began to see humans differently. The peaceful farmers and traders who had joined the Galactic Federation 50 years ago were revealing themselves to be something else entirely. Ambassador Velthar, the Velthari diplomat, whose ship had been saved by Captain Lee, sent a secret message to their government. We may have witnessed the awakening of the galaxy's true apex predators. The humans are not fighting like a cornered species. They are fighting like hunters who have found prey. War Chief Gravthok received disturbing reports from across his fleet. Human raids were becoming more frequent and more sophisticated. They had captured enough Korthak ships to outfit small fleets, and they were using Korthak technology against its creators. Sir, Thulgax reported during their daily briefing, the humans have captured one of our communication ships. They're using it to intercept our messages and coordinate their attacks. How is that possible? Gravthok demanded. Korthak encryption has never been broken. They didn't break it, sir. They captured the ship with its crew alive. Then they convinced the crew to cooperate. Convinced them how? Thulgax was quiet for a moment. The human interrogation methods are unusual. They don't use torture or threats. They simply explain, very calmly, what will happen to the prisoners' families if the war continues. Then they offer a choice. Help end the war quickly or watch it drag on for years. And our people are cooperating? Yes, sir. The humans are very persuasive when they explain the mathematics of persistence hunting. Elder Zermoth's voice crackled over the communication system. War Chief, I believe we have made a grave error. These humans are not like other species we have conquered. They are not fighting for territory or resources. They are fighting to eliminate a threat to their pack. What do you recommend? Gravthok asked. I recommend we offer terms for peace immediately, the elder replied, before they show us what they are truly capable of. But it was already too late. President Yoon Jae-won stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Federation. The Great Hall on Nexus Station had hosted peace conferences for 1,000 years, but today it felt more like a courtroom. Around him sat the leaders of 800 species, all waiting to see if humanity would choose peace or total war. Honored delegates, President Yoon began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. 6 months ago, the Korthak hegemony attacked our people for the crime of defending innocent civilians. Today I stand before you to announce humanity's final decision. The hall was completely silent. Everyone knew that this moment would determine the fate of the galaxy. War Chief Gravthok himself was present, his massive form looming in the Korthak delegation area. We offered the Korthaks peace, President Yoon continued. We offered them the chance to withdraw and never threaten civilian populations again. They responded by destroying New Busan and killing 50,000 innocent people. He paused and looked directly at War Chief Gravthok. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when we stop being nice. You're about to find out. Humanity hereby formally declares our intention to end the Korthak threat permanently, not just to defeat them, but to ensure they never again have the capacity to harm innocent people. We gave you peace. We gave you cooperation. We gave you friendship. You chose war. Now you get to see why we conquered our own planet before we reached the stars. The reaction in the hall was immediate. Several delegates fled their seats. Others activated emergency communication devices to warn their home worlds. But Gravthok remained seated, his 4 eyes fixed on the human president. You cannot destroy the Korthak hegemony, the war chief said, his voice like grinding metal. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years. Our fleets have never known true defeat. President Yoon smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. War Chief, you're about to learn the difference between ruling through fear and ruling through strength. Across the galaxy, Admiral Kang's plan went into motion. Operation Final Hunt was the largest coordinated military action in galactic history. Human fleets moved simultaneously against every major Korthak position in space. Captain Lee Dae-hyun, the man who had started this war by defending a single diplomatic ship, now commanded the flagship Guardian at the center of the human assault fleet. His crew had grown from 42 to over 400, and his ship had been rebuilt with the best technology humanity could produce. Target analysis? He asked his tactical officer. Korthak main fleet is positioned around their capital world of Korth Prime, reported Commander Park Min-hee, now serving as his second-in-command. 3,000 ships including their command fortress. The odds were still terrible. Humanity had built their fleet to nearly 2,000 ships, but they were still outnumbered. However, the humans had learned something important during their months of raiding. The Korthaks fought like they expected to win easily, and they didn't adapt well when their plans failed. All ships, this is Admiral Kang, came the voice over the communication system. Remember, we're not here to conquer their worlds or enslave their people. We're here to end their ability to threaten anyone ever again. The battle for Korth Prime began unlike any battle in galactic history. Instead of the traditional formation fighting that had dominated space warfare for millennia, the humans scattered into small groups and attacked from every direction at once. War Chief Gravthok watched from his command fortress as human ships swarmed through his defenses like angry insects. Every time his forces moved to engage one group, 3 more appeared elsewhere. "Status report," he demanded. "They're everywhere," Sub-Commander Thulgax replied, his voice strained. "Small groups of ships hitting our flanks, our rear, our support vessels. We can't establish a coherent defense. Then concentrate our fire on their flagship. Destroy their command structure. We've tried, sir. Every time we focus on one target, the others intensify their attacks. It's like fighting a pack of predators," Gravthok finished. "Yes, I know." Captain Lee's ship Guardian led the central assault on the Korthak command fortress. The massive station was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But Lee had learned something important from his first battle with the Korthaks. They expected enemies to be intimidated by superior firepower. "All power to engines," he ordered. "Direct course for the command center." "Sir." "That's suicide," his navigator protested. "No," Lee replied calmly. "That's how humans hunt." The Guardian accelerated toward the fortress, taking massive damage from its defensive weapons. But the human ship's approach was so unexpected that the Korthak gunners couldn't adjust their fire quickly enough. At the last moment, Lee's ship fired every weapon it had directly into the fortress's shield generators. The explosion created a hole in the station's defenses just large enough for smaller human ships to fly through. Dozens of fighters and bombers poured into the fortress, their crews singing old Korean songs as they attacked the station from inside. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human crews used every dirty trick they had learned during months of raiding. They rammed damaged ships into enemy formations. They overloaded their reactors to create massive explosions. When their weapons failed, they used mining equipment and construction tools. But most importantly, they fought as a coordinated pack. Every human ship was connected by a communication network that allowed them to act like a single organism. When one group was in trouble, others immediately moved to help. When an opportunity appeared, every human ship in range attacked simultaneously. Dr. Lim Hyung, monitoring the battle from the medical ship Hope, watched her instruments track human brain activity during combat. What she saw confirmed her theories about human psychology. "They're not just fighting," she reported to Admiral Kang. "They're hunting. Their brain chemistry is showing the same patterns our ancestors had when hunting large prey in groups." The turning point came when Lieutenant Bae Dong-hyun, now promoted to captain after his heroic defense of New Busan, led a boarding party against War Chief Gravthok's personal command ship. The young officer who had held a corridor for 7 hours was now leading assault teams against the heart of Korthak power. "Bridge secured," he reported as his team fought through the massive Korthak vessel. "War Chief Gravthok, you're surrounded. Surrender and order your fleets to stand down." Gravthok looked around his bridge. Half his crew was dead or wounded. His ship was crippled. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever encountered. "How?" he asked the young human captain.
"How did you defeat us?"
Bae Dong-hyun removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by months of warfare but still young and determined. "You made a mistake, War Chief. You thought humans were just another species that would be scared of you. What are you then? We're persistence hunters. We're pack predators, and we don't stop hunting until the threat to our pack is gone forever." The battle ended with the complete surrender of the Korthak fleet. For the first time in 3,000 years, the apex predators of the galaxy had been utterly defeated. In the aftermath, something unprecedented happened. Instead of enslaving the Korthaks or destroying their worlds, humanity offered them a choice. President Yoon explained the terms to the gathered representatives of the galaxy. "The Korthak hegemony is dissolved," he announced. Their military fleet is forfeit, but their people will not be harmed. Instead, they will become part of a new galactic peacekeeping force under human oversight. War Chief Gravthok, now a prisoner aboard the Guardian, spoke to Captain Lee. "Why do you not destroy us?" "We would have destroyed you." Lee considered the question carefully. "Because that's not what we are. We're not conquerors. We're protectors. Our species evolved to protect the pack, not to rule over others." "Then what happens now?" "Now the galaxy learns what it means to have humanity watching over it. No more species preying on weaker ones. No more raiders destroying civilian populations. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy, War Chief. We're interested in making sure everyone in it is safe." Dr. Park Min-hee, now serving as Earth's chief diplomat, worked with the other species to establish the new galactic order. The terms were simple. Any species that threatened civilians would face the combined might of humanity and their new Korthak allies. Ambassador Velthar, who had watched this entire conflict unfold since that first rescue, sent a final report to their government. "The galaxy is at peace again, but it is a different kind of peace. We now live under the protection of a species that treats warfare like art and death like poetry. They have shown us that there are worse things in the universe than the Korthaks. There are humans who have decided that innocent people need protecting." Captain Lee stood on the bridge of his ship as it patrolled the space lanes that had once been terrorized by Korthak raiders. His crew was back to its original size, and they had returned to their original mission: exploration and discovery. "Captain," reported Navigator Kim Junho, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim. Unknown attackers are raiding a civilian convoy." Lee smiled, but this time it was the smile of a Guardian who had found purpose. "Set course for the signal, maximum speed." "Yes, sir." "Should we call for backup?"